Good afternoon, we're here at Perth Wing Chun. I'm with Makarini, Antonino, and I'm Sifu Dan. So today we're going to be focusing on a little bit of Chi Sao. So I'm going to get Makarini to turn towards Antonino, and they're going to engage in what we call parallel arm Chi Sao. So I'll get Antonino on his right side, Makarini on her left side. Now for this exercise, Makarini is going to be initiating the attack. So her role is to try and attack in and exploit the holes in Antonino's guard. So he is simply a static target at this point. So use whatever you want, Makarini. So Bong Sao to open, moving into a Tan Sao. Now you'll notice that Antonino is static as we're doing this exercise, so he is not providing any resistance. So this is the first stage of Chi Sao training. You'll find a lot of instructors online, they'll have students where they'll make themselves look really, really good by standing quite static, and they'll basically just tear them and throw in all these different strikes. Now this is the first level that you want to develop in your Chi Sao, but unfortunately this doesn't necessarily reflect the realities of fighting. So to get to the second stage, what we're going to do now is we're going to add some movement. So Antonino is going to remain in his parallel arm Chi Sao. He's going to usually, you'll find that you naturally start to opt for more of a fighting position. So one leg tends to be forward. And parallel, we're trying to maintain contact with this arm, although in combat it does change. Sometimes you have no contact, sometimes you do. We're keeping this a Chi Sao exercise. So now Makarini is going to try and attack in, and Antonino is going to try and hold his position, and he's going to still create some roadblocks. The main roadblock he's going to create here is he's going to be making sure his center line is facing towards Makarini as often as possible, whilst remaining relaxed and calm under pressure. So he's actually learning how to defend without expending energy and using too much force, because you'll find most people when they're defending, they'll start to lock up their arms and shoulders, and that provides all these levers that higher levels tend to exploit. So Makarini's job is simply to attack in. She's trying to attack in as best as she can, exploiting different openings, using various Wing Chun techniques. Now remember, in Wing Chun there is no wrong or right, so there is just different ways of attacking in. You'll find a lot of lineages get concerned with the perfect Tan Sao, the perfect Bong Sao. In reality, there is no such perfect movement. When you're doing forms training and you're standing there on the spot, yes, perhaps you can do a perfect movement, but when it becomes live and dynamic, this is where you start to figure out what works. And this is only semi-live, because Antonino is not providing any real resistance yet. So this is where we lead into the third stage of Chi Sao, which is now adding in resistance. So this resistance can change from low to high resistance. So we're going to do between low and moderate resistance. So now as Makarini comes in, Antonino starts to counter. He starts using his different defenses, and you'll notice he is allowing Makarini to still finish off an attack. But this is where Antonino now gets an opportunity to try and figure out, how can I defend against some of these attacks? And it's the real, to me, this is where you start to see what works and what doesn't. So some of the movements that you may have been able to use in the static exercise, which is stage 1, you can no longer use now in stage 3 because your partner is changing the variables too quickly. So in live combat, things happen and they change very, very quick, which is why you don't often see the perfect Tan Sao and the perfect punch in a live situation. So now I will emphasize, this is Chi Sao, so we are maintaining that contact as much as possible. And this is going to lead into the future levels where we start to change the ranges. So at this point you'll see they are at one range, but eventually what's going to happen is we're going to go from wrist range to elbow range to shoulder range to body on body. And this is where we start to work in our takedowns and not allowing our opponent to have much space. You'll also notice that in this exercise there's an emphasis on keeping contact with both arms at the same time. So we don't want to just be active with our lead arm, we want to make sure that both of our arms are somewhat engaged. In traditional Wing Chun, we tend to go parallel arm, so we make contact with this arm. This arm is floating until the other arm comes into play. So as soon as this arm comes into play, it gives Antonino and now he has an opportunity to use this arm against this arm. This is what we call fighting parallel. We don't want to fight cross yet. Fighting cross is a little bit more complicated, and there's other things that we have to consider when we fight cross. But this section here is now allowing his arm to control Makarini's, and now she has to do something with this arm to try and get around that. And then the other arm has to come out, and this is where we start to see, it's almost like a game of chess, where you're starting to notice that there's different attacks coming in, and to counter those attacks in real time, you have to be able to defend space and learn how to utilize the correct technique in the correct sequence at the right time. Quite often in live combat, you'll find that the movements aren't the full extension. So the tan sao doesn't always end up being a full extended tan sao. It might be a little tan sao, or your bong sao might not be fully extended. It might be a little bong sao, and it's movable. It depends on the range, and it depends on how close the punch is towards you. Okay, great work, guys. Thank you very much.